Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I wanted to quickly cover rendering techniques within Blender for fashion and wearables. So you'll see behind me some of the results we're able to get with this process. So let's hop into Blender and check out how you can do this. So we're starting with a fresh file in Blender, right now running version 4.3. So let's go ahead and remove all the starting content. And we'll start by creating a human figure that we can then add our jewelry or pieces onto. So I have some plugins that I like to use for this process, which makes things super quick and way easier than doing this all from scratch. So the first one we're going to look at is called Human Gen, and this is a plugin you can get on blendermarket.com. And I'll put links in the description to all the tools I use, but here you can see Blender Marketplace, so you can grab everything there. Okay, so back in Blender, we can start by creating the person that we want. So we can just click on this button that pops up. We can scroll down, pick any figure we want. Let's just start with a simple base. We'll go with Luna here. Once you select that figure, you can hit the button for Generate New Human, and that'll populate them into the scene. So we can scroll through and see them popping up here. So I'll cover a couple things with Human Gen to quickly get over the basics. So the first thing we have here is we can change what the body looks like. So just super simple sliders for that. So we have drop downs of all the different parts of the body that we can change. We can just easily do some like overall things here. Another important one to look at is going to be the hair. So this will allow us to pick different hairstyles for our figure. And these are just going to be starting hairstyles. And I'll show in a second how we can add on to this and make a custom hairstyle. So let's just go with something like this. And you may notice as you go through these menus, the hair is going to change. So when we're in the hair menu, we can see what the hair looks like here. We can also make some changes to it. But if we go start editing other things, it's going to collapse the hair and not show it in the high detail just to save processing power on your computer, which is totally fine because we can always click this button and it'll bring the hair back so we can see that. The last important thing that I think's worth mentioning with this plugin, just when we go to quick rendering, is going to be the pose. So right now we have a really simple bone armature under here, but we can convert it to a Rigify rig if we have the Rigify plugin enabled with our Blender. So that'll just bring up a more detailed rig that we can use to edit this pose a lot more. Okay, so let's go back, bring the hair back in, and let's just quickly put this person into a more neutral rest pose. Okay, maybe we'll bring the shoulders down a little bit so they're not as tight. Okay, cool. Good enough for now. So before we go and see what this looks like rendered, let's take a look at the hair really quickly. So we can select the actual mesh of the person, and we can see in the particles tab over here the different pieces for the hair structure. So we have these four main groups here. I think the only ones that really show any great difference are going to be the strands and the base. So we can see the strands are this main top part and the base is underneath here. So these are our two main edit points. So once we have the mesh selected, if we go up here, we can go into particle edit, and then we can actually see the particles of the hair. So let's play with the strands first. So we have these controls on the left, and we can start by adding more length to this hair. So let's just make this brush a bit bigger. You can press F and scale up that brush. Now let's just zoom out a bit, and then just give a good overall lengthening to the hair. We'll bring it down to maybe shoulder length. And then we can just come back up to the comb. Let's make this bigger again. And we can go and start brushing this out to our liking. And we can give it some more volume with a little puff. Maybe a little bit too much. Let's turn down the strength of this. And we can see what it looks like if we go back to object mode and see it's a lot of volume there. So let's go comb it back out again, a little bit more. Super wide in the back. So let's bring this in. Try to get something a little bit more realistic here. The back is a little bit of a weird cut, so let's lengthen again, but this time a little bit smaller. Just gonna lengthen the middle. And we can always cut back, so we can go shrink and just take the little pieces, just make a better shape to this hair, and we can comb that again. A little bit better, not perfect, but you know, this should work for now. Okay, so let's take a look at what this looks like rendered. Let's change the frame count here just to 1 so we can take a single image. If we go to the render, let's set our render engine. We'll set this to cycles. I'm going to set mine to GPU compute. And let's look at the sampling settings. So viewport samples to 1024. We can denoise that as well. We'll see a denoise with that. And then render is sampling to 49.6. Keep a denoise on that. Okay, so let's press N to hide the plugins. And then let's go to viewport shading, render mode, see what that looks like. So we can see without anything in our scene, it's pretty dark. So I have the Blender Kit plugin up here, which I recommend you get. We can easily add an HDRI. Let's pull in some studio lighting and choose our favorite one. Let's just try some things. Try this one. That looks like pretty even lighting there on our figure. Okay, cool. So let's go back to normal clay shading, and I'm gonna pop another window out so we can have one side for modeling, the other side for the render view. Okay, let's add a camera in our scene now. Let's go back to our editing window. We'll do Shift A. We'll add a camera in. Let's pull that over here. And then let's also add a thing to focus on. So I'm just going to use an empty sphere here. And this will be our focus control. So let's just put that, just focus in on the chin at the moment. So if we go to the camera, we can position this manually, or we can add a constraint in here and we can track to this empty sphere we just made. So now if we move this sphere, the camera will automatically track to that. So let's right click or just select the camera and go to view camera, set an active object as the camera. And now we can see we are in the camera view. So if we go to the camera, let's just go to viewport display and change this to 1 so everything else is black. Okay, now it's in landscape view, and this is up to you what you want your view to be like. I'm going to change this to be more phone shaped. So let's go 1080 by 1920 here. And now we have a better landscape for Instagram or what have you. Okay, so now let's move this camera. I'm going to change this to local gizmo. So now we can slide this in and out. Do a track like that. Okay, so let's get this moved a little bit so we can center our model in this scene. That seems pretty good. Okay, so let's go back to render mode here. That's looking pretty nice. Let's turn off our overlays so we just have the image on this side, and we can keep all the overlays on our modeling side. Okay, so the quality of the materials is okay here, but it's not amazing. So let's go ahead and add some really nice textures to this model now. One thing before we do that, I'm just going to change the hair color. Yeah, let's just go gray or something like that. Okay, so for the skin, I have another plugin called Global Skin. Again, you can get this on Blender Marketplace. This is a really nice one that's going to add super high quality textures to our model instantly. So let's just select the person that we're using, which is from Human Gen. So let's select Human Gen, and let's just apply that shader. And we'll wait for it to update. The materials are much higher resolution here, so it's going to take a little bit longer to render, but the quality is going to be much, much better, so it's definitely worth it. So I'm going to have to blur that for you too. Got that in. Let's zoom in a lot more on the face here. Let's see. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so let's position this right on the tip of the face. So when we do depth of field, it works out well. So let's zoom up close here. And what is our focal length? Let's see, what does 32 look like? Gonna have to blur that again. Great. I like 80 more. Okay, so you can see the quality here is much, much higher. Let's go back. Let's change the hair again. Let's see. So we could start playing with the materials here and change the colors. Maybe we'll sculpt the hair a little bit more as well. Okay, so another thing about this plugin is we can change the look of the skin on the fly. So we can go see what super punchy looks like, see what grayscale looks like, change around the contrasts. So yeah, this is super nice as well. So let's just go back to default for now. So if we actually want to look at the material itself and start editing it, we can definitely go into the shader editor and look at the global skin here. And this has a bunch more options than what we could see from the plugin pop-up. So we have a bunch of control here over the skin tone, pores, freckles, blemishes. Okay, well, as I was trying to say before Blender crashed for rendering too hard, there's a lot of options to play with the material settings, so I would recommend going through and checking that out. In this video, I will be making no custom edits because that makes my graphics card crash. So we're sticking with the basics, but it still looks pretty cool with these basics. So let's go back to our editing and render view. So this is the full image here. And one last thing for rendering, let's just play with the camera. And I did say I would try depth of field, so we will try depth of field. Let's focus this on the empty sphere that we have, and we can control the amount of blur with the f-stop. So if we make this really small, we'll get a super shallow depth of field. And now we're only getting the exact center of the sphere. Let's make the sphere a bit smaller. So wherever the sphere is what is in focus. So if we go to the eye, that align with the eye, and then we just get the eye showing up here, which this is super shallow. So maybe we'll pull back a little bit. Let's try 0.3. And yeah, that eye's a bit more in focus now. So yeah, it could be a fun way to stylize your renders. So one last thing is just adding in our own designs. So let's find a model quick and put that in. Okay, so now that we've imported our geometry, let's just get this centered where we need this, and this is going to go on the nose as a nose ring. So let's rotate that, move that into position, and just scale that down. Okay, perfect. Looking really good. So one last thing, let's just apply a material to this. So I'm going to use Blender Kit again, and we can look for materials this time instead of HDRs. So let's go for a nice silver material. And we have a lot to choose from here. Let's try this one to start. So I'm just going to click on it since I already have the nose ring selected. It should automatically apply it. And that looks perfect. So let's just make sure that the material is mapping correctly. Just looking for some scratches in this material. Let's also make sure that the ring itself is unwrapped. So let's just go with this Smart UV project here. I set the island margin to 0.3 and just click unwrap. And if any of the mapping was weird, that should fix it. Let's just turn the depth of field actually off for this so we can see it a bit better. So let's go back to the nose ring. We're going to switch our mode to shader editor, change this material just a little bit more. So let's go to the mapping here on this, and we might just change the scale to see if we can get more scratches to show up on this, make it a tiny bit more realistic, not as super perfect. If I click and drag, I can select all three at once, and then I can move my mouse left or right to start changing the scale. So let's go really high and see if anything happens. Okay, yeah, we can start to see some defects on this in certain areas, making it look a tiny bit more realistic. Maybe we'll even give this one a shot and just see which one out of the three looks the best. Okay, so that's more of a white silver. Interesting. Okay, so this one's pretty simple. All it has is this one image here. So let's actually add mapping to this, and let's add inner coordinates as well, so we can set that UV as the vector. Cool, so this is now set up like the other ones. So let's change the scale again. Yeah, we can see immediately we're getting a lot more noticeable results here. So now we can just select the defect that looks the most realistic to us. Let's zoom out again, get a bigger perspective. And yeah, I think that'll work well here for our needs. So I'm going to do a little bit of final touches to this. Just we'll take a render and then I'll show you the next step for making this hyper realistic. So cut to that. So once we have our render, we can go ahead and bring this into AI to upscale this and make it look hyper realistic. So we'll start by loading Stable Diffusion, and there's other videos on YouTube you can watch to get Stable Diffusion set up for you. I'll have all the links to the required models and dependencies in the video description, so go check that and download those to make this all work. So once we load up Stable Diffusion, I have it here in my web browser. The workflow file will be linked on Patreon, so you can grab that there and just plug in your render and use this. I'll walk through a couple of the steps here to make this work. So the first one on the left here is uploading our render image. So we have that here. We then pass that image through another AI to automatically write the prompt to produce this image. So we could write the prompt ourselves for what we're trying to reproduce. So basically it's a cinematic photo of a model's face. Or we can use this AI to automatically write a more detailed prompt to get all of the things like the hair color and the jewelry positioning correct. So I'll leave the auto function on for the prompt writing. We'll come down here. We have a control net to figure out what the pose is of the model, so we can get the face pose correct. And we're also creating a depth map. So we have a really good depth estimation to create the final image. So that all then gets funneled into our K-sampler, and that will run the image AI, and that'll export the upscaled hyper-realistic image. We'll output there. So let's run this and see what happens. So we can see automatically it's calculating the pose of the face. So it's got really good tracking down on that. And then we also have a really nice depth map here as well for that image. So let's come back to the K-sampler. So it's about done running, and we'll see what output we get. So it's got the pose of the face down pretty good. It's got a darker hair color, and the jewelry on the face got pretty wild. So let's run it again. So a bit better. The hair is super gray this time. The nose jewelry is more correct, but let's try one more time. Okay, so it looks like we have some good examples to choose from now. So let's open up Photoshop and do the final composite. Okay, so now that we have our render and we have our AI upscale on that, let's go ahead and composite the jewelry correctly back into the scene. Okay, so for compositing the jewelry back into the AI rendered image, let's actually do another pass in Blender where we only render out the jewelry with shadows though, but we don't want to render out the actual model. Okay, so for this to work, let's first come to the render property settings, go to film. It will enable transparent, and that'll make the background of the scene transparent, so that'll not show the HDRI in the render, because we want a clean, transparent background to composite the jewelry back into the shot in Photoshop. So second step is we don't want the model to show either, but we do want the shadows to show. So we'll come and we'll click on the geometry of the model, and we'll come to the object properties, and we'll come down to the visibility section, and under mask, let's enable shadow catcher. So that'll make sure that the object is only catching shadows and not contributing to the color in the render at all. So once you have those two settings down, let's hit render, and let's see the final render. That should be just the jewelry, and I believe the eyes as well, because they're not part of the geometry of the face. Yeah. So we're getting the jewelry here, and we're getting the shadows cast on the face and in the nose from the piece of jewelry. So in compositing, we'll take out the eyes, a little scary looking like this, but this should allow us to composite in the jewelry without having to do a mask paint in Photoshop, which will take ages with this kind of jewelry. Okay, so let's do another pass on the render as well that does not have any shadows or any model. So let's go back to the model. We'll go up here to the outliner, and let's go to the toggle and turn on the holdout setting. And we can come down to the human gen container, and we'll just turn on holdout. And what that'll do is it'll mask out this model in the scene entirely. So let's go through, set another render, and I'll do this again. And this time it should only show the jewelry and not the model at all. So doing it this way, we can have fine control over the opacity of the shadow. Okay, so now that we have both of those layers in, we have the shadow layer and we have the jewelry layer on top of that. So let's first go through and put a mask on both of these, and we'll just paint out the eyes. And then the other one should have a holdout layer, so there's nothing there at all. Okay, so with the shadow layer, we can change the opacity on this one to change the opacity of the shadow, and the jewelry will be on top of that. So with the shadow, we have complete control over the darkness of this, and we can even put some different blending modes on it if we want to play with the color. So it looks like overlay might do pretty well. Yeah, now the color is matching a lot better to the AI render. Awesome. Well, that looks pretty good. You could do some manual tweaks if you wanted to, but all the masking is perfect because of everything we had set up in Blender and in ComfyUI, Stable Diffusion. So yeah, that's everything for the tutorial. I hope you learned something. Thanks for tuning in. As always, the project files for this video are going to be on Patreon. So if you're not signed up, go get signed up over there and you can download everything I used today and run it yourself. I know that was a lot to cover, so hopefully you were able to follow along, but drop any comments below if you have questions. Maybe I can do a different video on certain parts of this because I know there were a lot of different steps here. So overall, hope you enjoyed. Hope you stick around for videos in the future. I've got a lot of other fun stuff planned, but in the meantime, take care of yourself. Hopefully you're enjoying life and keep creating. And with that, see ya.